Hello, welcome to Meet the Thriller Author, a podcast that features interviews with authors of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense novels. My name is Alan Peterson, and I am your host. I am also an author of thrillers, and that is why when I decided to start a podcast where I would be interviewing fellow authors, I decided to focus on the genre that I write in and that I love, which is the thriller genre. And for simplicity's sake, by thrillers here, I'm talking about books that you would find in Amazon's mystery, thriller, and suspense category, as well as its subcategories of crime fiction, such as police procedurals, psychological thrillers, espionage, those type of novels. These are the authors that you'll be meeting during this podcast. Okay, so with that out of the way, stay tuned for the latest episode of Meet the Thriller Author. Hey everybody, welcome to Meet the Thriller Author. I'm your host, Alan Peterson. And for this episode, I'm interviewing John Hegenberger, who writes the Stan Wade and Elliot Cross thrillers and in other genres, but we're going to be talking today with him about his books. John, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, I'm an old fogey. I've been writing for a long time, but it's been on and off. My first book was published back in 1988, but it was nonfiction. And I raised a family and worked in corporate America, and then finally retired about 2 years ago now. And got out that box and opened up that drawer and dusted off those manuscripts and jumped back into full-time writing.
Oh, wow, that's great. So that's like your second career, huh?
Yeah, it's sort of like you have to reinvent yourself every year or two.
For listeners who aren't familiar with your books, can you describe about your novels? Can you just tell us a little bit about them?
Well, like I said, old fogey, but I don't want to really push that button too hard. I might lose listeners rather than gain them. Anyway, I started out writing a lot of private eye novels, from Hammett and Chandler references and influences, and that's why I've got two private eye characters and two series running. But in today's world, even though the private eye I'm writing about might be actually happening back as far back as 1959, there's this thriller aspect to the stories. These are really adventure stories. And more importantly, most of the private eyes in that genre at that period usually just stuck in their mean streets in their noir city and didn't hardly ever cross anything other than the wrong side of the railroad tracks. But my guys, they get around. They get out to Europe and down to the Caribbean, and they fight commies, and they're dealing with nuclear threats at times. So they really are thrillers. They just start out as private eye fiction.
And so it's the Stan Wade books, they're all set in 1959?
That's right.
Oh, so that's cool. So like I kind of like that because that's it's been interesting I've been reading some books set during the Cold War and before spy phones and all that stuff. So it makes it a little more interesting how you used to do that. How do you do a lot of research on that and how to get the era right?
Well, I was there at the time. And I fondly remember it from my childhood. So that's the foundation. But then you're right. You have to do some research because everything that you thought might have been the case or might have happened, it's not necessarily the truth. And you're remembering, with like an 11-year-old brain. So a lot of time has passed. So yeah, there's a lot of digging around. And I started going there because I was happy to go there. It was fond memories from childhood. But then the deeper I got, and the research started showing me all sorts of fascinating little factoids that have sort of been forgotten, and things that we didn't know then, but we know now. And if we had known them then, oh my God, So that got me really excited. So I get the time period to play around with, and then I get this like secret history of things that really happened, or maybe happened. We don't have the proof, but we've got enough time since then to piece the pieces together and come up with fascinating ideas about what life was like back in 1959.
Yeah, probably some of the things that were talked about that could only happen in fiction in 1959 probably become reality nowadays. when it comes to the spy world. Is the Elliot Cross is that set in the 1950s as well?
No, Elliot's 1988.
Oh, okay.
And he's not in Los Angeles. He's in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I'm at. So this is a home-based stories, again, sort of from my own past. I took 2 or 3 years sabbatical in 1988 between jobs and reinvented myself, right? And that's when I started writing some of the concepts and plot lines for the Elliot Cross series. And they just percolated back up into their own series.
Oh, and so now, why do you write the thrillers? Is that the genre that you enjoyed to read before you started to write them?
Yeah, we call them thrillers, but honestly, again, old fogey, I guess. I go back to Pulp Fiction, and to me, these are really adventure stories. And I'm not going to say, as far back as Jules Verne or something, but usually you have one central character, possibly two, and they are going off on an adventure, and they're getting in way over their head, and that's the fun of the storyline. So we call them thrillers a lot today, and we classify them as legal thrillers and medical thrillers and spy thrillers and things. But typically they're just about some ordinary guy like Cary Grant in North by Northwest who falls into something and gets in over his head and has to scramble to get out. And that's thrilling, but it's just a big adventure.
That's a great movie, too. Who's like some of your favorite thriller authors, and did they influence your writing?
Well, the standard thriller authors would be, the Clive Cussler stuff, crew, and the Lee Child stuff. But the real influences really are back in the private eye fiction, the murder mysteries, including the ones today, Craig Johnson, for instance, with his Longmire books. And there are 3 or 4 other first-person, I'd say, inheritors to the crown or throne of Dashiell Hammett or Raymond Chandler. The lyrical quality of their writing, the light humor that's maybe in the wisecracking narrative, and the guy always getting cracked on the back of the head and knocked out 5 times. That's the real strong influence for me.
What inspired you to write your first book?
Gosh, I don't know. I think just what I was saying before, the idea that I liked a lot of that 1959 private eye stuff in Hollywood. You could still catch old TV shows like 77 Sunset Strip,
Mm-hmm.
Peter Gunn and stuff. And you could see that stuff, and it brought back my memories when I first saw it as a kid. 1959, these were episodic. There was very little continuity with the characters. It wasn't like a fully developed world. There wasn't this universe of private eyes or crime in Los Angeles. These were all individual, discrete stories. And I guess what I started thinking about was the idea of, could we go back to that time period, but let's face it more realistically, or more in terms of the way we would like to hear and see a story done today. So I started cobbling together ideas about, well, if I had been a private eye, let's say in 1959 Hollywood, this is the kind of way life would have been, not according to the TV 30-minute episodes, but this is the way, an individual character would live his life. He would be smoking all of the time because everybody did back then. And he'd be, doing the hard drinking just like most of the private eyes do. But today's sensitivity makes this character unsympathetic. So maybe to be a real character, he would be one of the earliest people to really say, I probably ought to stop smoking coffin nails, and I had to maybe wise up and take it easy on the bourbon bottle a little bit. Makes him more real. And once they're more real, then the adventure that he's on seems more real, and the whole book and the whole adventure is exactly the kind of stuff that I wanted to create. So that's kind of how I got started.
Oh, and do you find pop culture references? Do they make it into your books? And are you using the pop culture references from that time period?
Oh, boy. Well, actually, Los Angeles is probably a character in the Stan Wade books, just as much as Stan is. But because it's Los Angeles, I probably have, 15 to 20 walk-ons appearing somewhere in every one of the books. He runs into everybody that was around in L.A. in 1959. Jack Benny, John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, on and on and on. And the same thing is true for the time period as regards to the research. If I set the story and it's July 10th, and he picks up the newspaper, I go and research and find out what were the actual headlines of the LA newspapers on July 10th. And usually there's some fascinating international thing that was happening, like the Cuban Revolution headlines were involved. So we get historical references all over the place. We get all kinds of walk-ons from television and film because we're in LA. And even if he goes back and looks at the comics section, I research and try to figure out what was Dick Tracy doing on July 10th, or what was on the radio that he might have caught, or what was the popular song of the day that he might hear while he's driving down the freeway.
And are you able to do that research online, or do you have to go to the library to find the newspaper copies, or?
It's everything, really. I have a lot of the material already at hand from my own collection. Online research is usually a double back to find out, make sure my memory didn't fade me. And if I decide that I'm going to have Alfred Hitchcock in the novel, I'll go and get 2 or 3 books and read biographies of the main character, Hitchcock, just to make sure that I know exactly what was he doing then, what was he planning to do, what was his next film, what was his last film, was it a success or was it a dog, so that when the character walks on stage, he's true to the time and place that I put him in that particular novel.
So how long does it take you from the time you start doing the research and then you start writing to finishing the book? Like, how long does it usually take you?
Well, the research continues on and on and on. People ask me, do you get writer's block? And my answer is I get writer's shock. Because I'll get halfway into the book or even further and suddenly discover a brand new factoid that I wasn't aware of when I started out. And what shocks me is the fact that that particular factoid will drop right into place almost as if I had planned it all along, which is really kind of spooky. It's a plot twist that I had nothing in mind for at the outset, and then suddenly by continuing on with the research, I find out so-and-so actually happened to have been at this particular place 1 block away on that particular date. Oh, well, in that case, we have to make a slight adjustment so that they can, have a bumper or somewhere on the highway or something, and just spend a few minutes chatting.
Oh, yeah, the research creep, huh?
Yeah, a lot of people think that you ought to hide the research, and I dote on that. I think the readers like the verisimilitude of sitting down and being in the place. Understanding as if I were there. What was the movie playing at the Fantasia's Theater there on Hollywood Boulevard that he's just driving past, and not just say he drove past the theater, but explain who was on the marquee, and as if it was real. And you're right, people can go on the internet and they can dig out photographs and they can do enough research or remember from their own past, so that I'm hoping that they go like, wow, this is really cool. And for me, it is really cool creating it. So I hope that that's exactly how they feel when they read it.
And do you any similarities between you and your main characters? Do you put a little bit about a little bit of yourself into your characters?
Well, I write like comedy, I guess, and I think there's some amount of that in myself. There's a little bit of performance art in being a writer, and I think there's a little bit of the narrative of both of those characters, both of those private eyes, where they are wisecracking or telling a joke or pulling somebody's leg or pulling the wool over somebody's eyes, if you will. So there is that similarity, but they're all younger than me, of course, and I'd like to think that Elliot Cross is more like me. He's the one that's set here in town in Columbus, Ohio, where I am. But honestly, if I had to pick, I'd rather be Stan Wade, because that's where all the real fun is, out in L.A.
And do you find is it easier or more challenging to write the Stan Wade out in L.A. versus Columbus, Ohio, that you know so well because you live right there, or is it different challenges?
It's actually the other way around, because I can fantasize and make stuff up, and there's all sorts of fascinating things in Los Angeles. Here in Columbus, there's not a lot of wonderful theaters or a seashore or Disneyland. All that stuff that makes a great setting. This is just like the heart of the heartland. This is just home. So when those stories here in Columbus get told, they do make a lot of references to places and things that are here in Columbus. But I'm sure that somebody who lives in another town, like I say Kansas City, they could care less what building he drove past, you know. But in L.A., no, there's always some fascinating thing about him going up to Griffith Park or up on Mount Baldy or Pacific Ocean Park or Marineland and on and on and on. So I have more fun out in L.A.
Yeah, so so you mentioned before that like LA's kind of a secondary character in itself to the
Right.
to those novels. Yeah.
Right.
And so, what are some of the challenges when you're bringing these stories to life?
Having time, I guess, to get them all out. And, yeah. My worst problem, I think, is that I try to do too much, and by that I mean I've got about 3 books going right now.
Oh wow!
And I probably ought to do just one, but for various reasons, I just jump around. Maybe I get stalled out in one, or maybe I get an opportunity that looks like I'm going to be able to sell this particular one if I can hurry up and get it done. So I set another one aside. So that's probably my biggest challenge, being able to balance all that out.
So you write both series at the same time, just kind of back and forth.
Well, yeah, I write those, and I write science fiction.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah, I've got 3 science fiction books out too, and I just wrote my first Western about a month ago. That'll be out in July.
Oh, cool. So, what is that a Western? Where is that set at?
That one's set in Wyoming,
Oh, okay.
Medicine Bow, and I chose that place because I have a second one that I'm halfway through, and I wanted to do a sort of a crossover. So in the book that comes out in July, it's a gunslinger kind of a main character, but somewhere in the story he stops in the dance hall, and he's broke and he needs money. So he sits down at the card table and plays it with his gambler, and ends up basically just pointing the gun at the gambler and walking off with the money. But in the second book, the one that I'm working on right now, it's told from the gambler's point of view, and it's a totally different story, but it also takes place in Medicine Bow, Wyoming. And that same scene shows up again, only it's now from the gambler's point of view, where this gunslinger comes up for a brief appearance and sticks him up for the winnings on the table, and then leaves. And I wanted to do something like that, so believe it or not, that little idea basically caused me to have to write 2 books.
Wow. That's
Well,
pretty cool.
there's plenty of other stuff I wanted to do, you know. But it was the moment that I got the idea about reversing the scene that I said, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to do both of these books now, you know.
Yeah, it's incredible how that works. So you get a little spark of an idea, and next thing you know, you're working on 2 books.
Yeah, no, you're in Japan or something. How would you get?
So now, where do you usually write? Is you obviously on the same area, or?
No, I'm either on the back porch in the summer, or up in my writing room during the winter if it's raining, or down here in the family room next to the TV if there's a good tennis match on, or in the dining room where I've got stuff spread out all over the table where I do a lot of outlining. So I'm all over the house.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you also about your writing process. So you said you're an outliner. So you outline your novels pretty thoroughly, or is it like a brief outline?
No, well, it starts off. The whole process starts off with just whacked out ideas of what I want to do, and they go into a folder. And then I sit down with them and spread them out, and I say, okay, I want to do this. I want to do this. It's like putting a movie together. I want this kind of a scene. I want that kind of a chase scene. Okay, fine. Those are the tent poles, if you will. Then I have to work up an outline. Well, what's the motivation that causes this to happen and then that to happen? And are they related or are they separate? You know. So I have this maybe 1-page outline based on that. Then I have to develop the characters, and in the process of that, we end up with about a good 5-page outline. Then I take a stab at the first couple of chapters, just to see if this is all going to work and if the character comes alive. And usually they always do. And then I go back to the outline because in living with the character for those chapters, I've, in the back of my mind, dreamt up 17 other things I want to put into the story. So, bam, now the outline's twice as big as it was. And then I get serious about the outline. After about a week, I let it sit. But then I get serious and say, well, look, this is going to be a novel, so it's got to have an outline bigger than this. So what's really this story about? What's its essence or its theme? And that gives me the third outline. So I'm outlining all over the place, which is my advice to other writers is they say, you should write and rewrite. I say you should outline and re-outline.
Yep, I just switched over from now starting to outline very thoroughly, and it's helped me a lot versus just trying to figure it out as you go along.
Well, if you're jumping around like I am between books and stuff,
yeah.
you got to have a map, or else you're going to definitely get lost.
Yeah. And how do you outline? Do you use do you use pen and paper, or do you use on a computer program?
I don't use a computer program. It's just, outside of Word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I scribble up most of the stuff first draft. It's my speed writing draft, and then I compose it into Word, which is a rewrite or an edit, if you will. And a lot of times I know what the third act would be, or the third portion of the book, but not in great detail. So by the time I get about midway in the book, I decide I better start getting serious about the ending of this thing. What was it I wanted to do here? And I'll use little Post-it notes and stick them on a page and start rearranging. Basically, it's a list of everything I want to make sure I don't forget to put in. And then they start finding their way into a proper sequence that lines up nicely with the rest of the novel. And somewhere along the line, it blossoms in my mind some major secret factoid that I had no idea I was writing about to begin with. And bam, it goes into the novel, which gives me my big climax usually.
And do you write every day?
No, I write probably every other day, but I write every day and twice on Sunday. I'm always writing. If I'm watching television, I will jump up and run in the other room and make a note about something and miss whatever happened in the television show I was watching. But it's constant writing. It just isn't a word count every day kind of a approach.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so yeah, you don't have I got to write X amount of words today. It's just sort of you're just always writing.
Well, in retrospect, when I look back, it's about 4 pages a day, but I don't force myself to meet that commitment.
Mm-hmm.
I can go a couple of days with nothing and then sit down and do 20 pages sometimes, but it boils down to about 4 pages, yeah.
And so what keeps you writing? It's
just the joy of it, I guess, the pure joy. Remember that writer's shock I mentioned?
Yep.
Yeah. To start with a blank page and end up with something that you had no idea, maybe you knew, or you kind of grow a little bit as a person too every time you write because you get a little introspective and you start realizing things that you believe or you think that you didn't really have on the top of the surface of your brain. And in the process of writing, some of this stuff comes out. So it's almost like keeping a journal once in a while, too. So it makes you a better person, I think.
And do you still find time to read?
Not as much as I'd like. In fact, reading is not as much of a joy as it used to be. Now it's mostly a case of analysis, and I'll get about 1 page in, and something will spark an idea. And I'll have to put the book down and go over and make a note or make an adjustment to somewhere in the manuscript that I'm working on, and then come back to the book. So it's not the same kind of reading as it was, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago, where you could pick up a book and just devour it.
Yeah, because now you start. Yeah, you're reading it as a writer now, so you start seeing things right differently.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible for me to sit down and just simply enjoy a book any longer. I mean, I enjoy it on a different level, I guess. As the writer, you're enjoying the craft, where before you might have just been coasting right along with the author's story and voice. And now you're saying, well, that's an interesting voice. That's an interesting twist. That's an interesting character. That's an interesting idea. And, all those interests are really distractions from the fantasy world of the book itself.
Hmm. Yeah, that's from the authors that I've interviewed. That you have those who continue to read because it's kind of like a learning process, but then others don't want to read anymore because they don't want to be influenced either. So it's kind of an interesting uh, approach for the different writers. So now, how do you interact with your readers? Do you have are you like on Facebook and all that good stuff?
Sure. I've got a website, and it's just myname.com.
Hmm.
And I'm on Facebook, right, and Twitter. I've done a few other things, but they just haven't stuck with me. Tumblr and Pinterest, because they seem more graphic, I guess, than the others. I'm more text oriented than image oriented. Uh, so yeah, they should be able to reach me easily just by typing in my name or Googling me, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for the listeners, I'll have links to all that if they're on the website as well too. But yes, it's johnhegenberger.com is the main place to go to.
Yeah.
I say you got something you guys on YouTube. You got some stuff there on YouTube too.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, I've got a couple of trailers for some of the books.
Oh, cool! Did you enjoy making those, or did you have somebody else to make those?
Actually, that's the other joy with all of this, with electronic publishing things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming up with those trailers, for instance, and I think I'm going to have audio of one of my books perhaps in the next 2 weeks. And I'll probably start down that road for my 8 or 9 books. And some of the personal appearances and signings are pretty cool. I've got another one coming out in August, so I'll have a launch party at Killer Nashville. And I'm excited about doing that public stuff
Mm-hmm.
as much as the private stuff of creating the novels and short stories.
Yeah, it must be fun to meet your readers in the flesh.
Yeah, in a way, I'm in the middle of a 4-month, 5-book tour because I had 2 or 3 books out earlier this year, and I got a couple more coming out this summer. So I've had about 3 or 4 signings here in the last month, and a couple of conventions I've been at, and a couple more still to go until August.
Oh, it's a busy schedule with the writing and the book tours.
I think it'll calm down come the cold weather here in Columbus.
So you say you're working on a couple projects right now. Can you tell us a little bit about your current work in progress?
Sure. Well, the main item that's on the desk right now is a true thriller. And it's a multiple character, contemporary, world-spanning adventure story. We've got a deadly virus. We've got a team of characters chasing around for the answer. And the title I've got on it right now is the Pandora Block, because they have an ancient artifact that they have to decipher, decode to be able to find the cure for the virus that they're dealing with worldwide. So that's the one that I'm the most excited about now, and that's why I set aside the other Western that I mentioned to you.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another Stan Wade all plotted out, ready to go as soon as I get a free minute. And I just the other day started thinking about a new Elliot Cross, even though I thought I was kind of done with him. But I think I figured out a way maybe that Columbus, Ohio, Private Eye 1988 may get a telephone call from another Private Eye in Los Angeles. So we may have a team up.
Oh, okay, like a little crossover, a little bit, kind of.
Yeah. So it's gonna be a while before that one comes out. There's a series of science fiction novels that'll be out in the next year about Triple I. That's the first private eye agency on Mars.
Oh, nice.
That'll be out, and believe it or not, I have yet another Western, another SF novel that I'm contracted for that I've got to fit into the schedule somewhere along the line.
How many books do you have out right now?
A total of 9, not counting the nonfiction ones that I wrote years ago.
Do you find it writing fiction versus nonfiction? Is it like two different beasts, or is it similar? Just kind of curious.
Well, fiction's got dialogue and act, and nonfiction doesn't. But after that, we were talking before about research.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, when you're doing nonfiction, you're probably having to do some studying and analysis and research. And there's a lot of that in the Stan Wade books. So there is a kind of a connection between the fiction and the nonfiction due to this bridge about heavy-duty research.
So, is there anything else you would like to let the listeners know before I let you go?
Well, I'd like to thank them for listening, and if they've read any of my books, please give me a buzz or send me a note. You can reach me at the website. I really appreciate any time and effort they spent in sharing in all my wacky dreams, and I will promise to continue on with more of the same. And thank you.
All right, sounds like a good deal. All right, thank you very much for being on the show. I really enjoyed talking to you about your work.
It was fun talking with you too as well. Bye.
All right, bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Meet the Thriller Author. You can learn more about this podcast and about future interviews over at the website at www.thrillingreads.com/podcast. And if you haven't done so yet, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. You can do it on Stitcher, or you can do it by email over at the website. I'd also like to invite you to join the mailing lists so you never miss an episode. And I'd also like to invite you to visit my author page at Facebook, Alan Peterson Books, and also my website, alanpeterson.com.